Hi everyone, my name's Thomas Rayner and I'm a Microsoft MVP for PowerShell, and right now I'm going to show you how to tweak the hell out of your PowerShell prompt and go from basic to baller. Not even going to have any slides today, we're just diving straight into our demo. And this is my prompt, this is my normal working environment when I'm noodling around in the PowerShell console. And you'll notice a couple of things. First, I'm not using the standard PowerShell.exe console. I'm using conemu, which is short for console emulator. It's just so that I can have tabs. I can press this plus button here and create a new console, and I can have tabbed browsing there. And close that tab, get back to the first one, and that makes it a little easier when I'm working with a whole bunch of different consoles at the same time. They don't get spread everywhere, and they're easy to go. The next thing you might notice is the colorful, elaborate prompt. And as part of that, I've got these little arrow characters. I'm using these little arrow characters are separating different elements of my prompt from each other. They're kind of creating some visual space. I'm getting those by using a special font for what's known as Powerline. If I go into my settings, the main console font I'm using is this one for Powerline. If you use any of the quote-unquote Powerline fonts, you'll be just fine with what we're going to be doing here. And it's not essential. I just kind of like how the little arrows kind of help lead into each other and make it look like it's tiled on top of each other. I think it's neat. So you'll want to be using conemu if you're getting it exactly like I've got, and with one of these Powerline fonts as well. You'll also notice, if you're looking really closely, my prompt is actually 2 lines. This line of my prompt is followed by a whole bunch of white space and then some elements here, followed by a whole new line for these 4 elements on the second line. And this is where I begin typing. Like if I just type in ls or get child item, it does my whole get child item of that directory. Whoa. And it'll give me my prompt at the bottom here. So this is my prompt, and I'll show you how to get it. This is our end goal. This is what we'll be building, and this is what my entire prompt function actually is and does. And so I'll be breaking this down piece by piece and showing you how it works, and then I'll show you how to get some of the nifty visual effects that we've got here. So let's start from kind of go left from right visually as we're looking here. And the first thing I've got is this 0003, and if I do another command, it'll go up to 4. And it's incrementing with every line number I do. That's handy if you want to do Invoke History ID 3. See that 3 goes on this line, and it invokes that history again. I use that a lot when I'm just trying to run a line that I've already run, and I don't want to have to type it all out again. I don't want to have to use the up arrow to try to get there. There's a shortcut R. You can just go R3, and it'll take the invoke history is the what R is an alias for, and then it'll do the ID of 3. So you can get that by going my invocation dot, and you can kind of tab through here. There's a whole bunch of good stuff, but history ID is the one we're looking for, and so that's number 6. I get the 4 dots by doing this. You can use the string interpolation operator. So if I go 0:D4, I'll break that down for you now. I get those 4 characters, and usually I don't have a console open for much more than a couple hundred commands at most, so 4 digits is more than enough for me. This what I've got here is a string, which is just the the curly brace 0:D4 curly brace, and what the F is doing is it's inserting whatever argument comes after it into that 0 spot. And I'm going to use this type of functionality a lot, as you're going to see pretty quick here. This is just for string interpolation, and the D4 tells it that it's treating it like digit or a number, and it's doing 4 not significant digits, because that's a different scientific term, but it's doing 4 digits to show you these leading zeros. Alright, and this 1 is another special character there, followed by that number 1. What that is if you use push and pop location, you can navigate around the file system a little easier. So if I'm in just C users Thomas with no S, I can go push location, and then I can go C temp, and look, that number goes up to 2. What that's a metric of is if I go get location stack, it'll show me all the items in my previous locations. I can go push, location C Windows, and it goes up to 3. And if I get that stack again, it's showing me kind of where I've been. And so if I go get location, stack.count, that's where my 3 comes from. And the reason that's helpful is if I go pop location with no arguments, it'll put me back in that ctemp folder, and it allows me to move backwards up that stack. And so if you're one of those people who gets in here and you go, oh yeah, I'll change directory, and then change into some other directory, and oh, I want to go back to the last one that I typed all the way out, push and pop location are a handy way of getting around there. The next one I have in this little purple leaf is the drive letter that, drive.name. Just the drive that I'm on. If I've got other drives hooked up to my machine, it'll tell me which one I'm working in. And then finally, I've got just the name of the folder I'm in. So I don't have the full path. If I do like present working directory, well, this one's ctemp, but do I have another folder in here? I can switch into this demo folder, and this changes just to demo, even though the entire path is ctemp demo. I don't have anything with the temp in there. This is just a little visual reminder to kind of show me which folder I'm in. And I can get that by going split path, PWD stands for present working drive, and going leaf, and then I just get the demo. So right now we're just getting all these elements here out of the way so that I can show you how to make them all colorful and interesting to look at. If we look over to the other side, I've got this green arrow, this green tab here, and that is the execution time, the execution duration of the last command that was run. So if I do like a sleep seconds 1, it takes a second, and then you can see it was 1 second, and then very small amount of time on top of that. If you do a directory listing, very small amount of time to get that. This is handy, especially when you're working with like the Azure commands. Some of them can take a pretty long time to run, or anytime you're reaching out and touching an API or a third-party module, or even some of the Active Directory commands can take a pretty good time to try to get through some of this stuff. So the way you can get that is by looking at get history. And then if you look at -1 is to count backwards in an array, and that's the most recent, you get a couple of items here, just ID and then the command line that was run. And if you pipe that into select star, you'll get the ID of the line that was run, so it was ID 25. You get the command line, and since I had run this command, that became the most recent command run, whether it was completed or not, and then the start time that it started at and the end time that it ended at. And in this view, it just looks like normal written time, but those are actual date time objects, so you can run them here and do something like, let's store this in a variable just to make it a little easier, called COMM for command. And then if we go new time span, I can go com.start execution time and com.end execution time and get this whole date time object back, which is pretty cool. And then if I put that in some round braces and do a toString, you get output that looks pretty much like the output I had, where was it, 239933? 239933. This is how long the command we're looking at took to run, and that's how I populate the data for this area. This is just the time and date that the thing ran at. So if you want to just go get date, format, and then it's 2 hours, so I get the leading 0 there if I don't need it. Minutes is capital M's, seconds, and then TT is for the AM PM. I could go 24-hour time, but this is a little easier when I'm looking at it. And that's how you get that data. So that is how you get all of the individual pieces that are in my prompt. And so now it's a matter of putting them together in this wonderful, beautiful, amazing, colorful, little impressive way here. Impressive with air quotes around it. So I need to first introduce you to the concept of Ansi escape codes. And I'll scroll just at the top of this Wikipedia page here. And I'm not going to narrate the thing to you, but effectively what they are is they're for controlling cursor position, visual elements, even some other related elements that start with this escape and then an opening square bracket. And they're embedded into the text that you're actually posting. And so in addition to the text that you're sharing with the user or with yourself, if you're the consumer of this like we are in our prompt, this is embedding instructions on how to display it. You guys have all seen things like write host something, foreground color is blue, background color is white, and you get stuff like that. That's basically what we're trying to accomplish, is messing with those colors. But instead of using excuse me, instead of using write host to do it, we want just to use a more flexible array of colors as well. So if we kind of look at this Wikipedia page, I'm not going to read through it real closely. Whoop, come here. We are going to see that we can do things like escape N to shift things, and escape opening square brace is our CSI, or control sequence indicator, and its effect is literally the most useful sequences, or most of the useful sequences. So if we kind of scroll down here, we have our CSI sequences. This is going pretty quick because I really just want to show it to you. But this escape and then opened square brace followed by any number of parameters, and then by a number of intermediate bytes, and then finally a range. Here we go, and some more stuff. Escape square brace M acts like a reset. That's going to be important. But what we can do here is things like graphic rendition. And if we do escape and then like 38, we can set the foreground color. If we do escape and 48, we can set the background color. And it even tells us here the next arguments are 5 semicolon N, 5 semicolon N, and that's going to become important when we're setting our colors. I'm going to come back and use this as a reference real quick, because also on this Wikipedia page there is some items here that show you kind of how the colors render. ConEmu has some differences here. And they don't necessarily render in true 256-bit mode, but we'll be able to get by with what we're doing here. So, the first thing you might be going is, how do I include the escape character in my string? Well, it's a character just like any other, so I'm just going to make a $E to hold it here, and it's just character ASCII 27. And if you just write it out, it doesn't really do anything. It puts a blank line. It's just like hitting escape. It doesn't really do anything on its own, because that's what we're in. We're in a terminal. But we saw, if you have the, let's put this in quotes actually, the escape character, and then an open square brace. And then what do we need? Let's come back up here and just do 48 for our background color. And you can kind of see if you're looking ahead. This B for background is the escape character. Oh, get out here. And then 48. And then 48. And then it told us a semicolon, then a 5, and then a semicolon. And then we're going to put the number that we want our color to be. And let's just pick a random one for 71. And then what we need is an M and our text. If we do that, this kind of looks a little messed up, doesn't it? Because this isn't really working the way we want. And that's generating that because we didn't do the termination at the end. So if we go E0, this is more like what we're actually trying to drive towards. This our text is all trapped inside of this series of escape sequences. So this element here is defining our background color. Then we have our text, and then we have this to tell it to ignore or to stop executing that escape sequence. Again, this is a pretty abstract concept that you have to sort of get your head around a little bit in order to use these effectively. But they're really flexible and robust, and they're very handy for trying to show off in your prompt and stuff like this. You get a lot more color options. We also had that escape sequence for the foreground color, so we could go our escape character again, open 38, 5, and I'm just picking random colors here, so this may or may not work. Then we'll go M. And so, I don't know, maybe that's sort of a purpley color. It's not the most attractive color combo in the world. But these are the foundations of what we're trying to do. So, if I want to kind of reduce this into some more shorthand, I can go F for foreground equals the escape character. Let's make this a string. The escape character, open brace, 38, 5. And let's just call that there. And I can do a background color character for my escape. And 48, 5. And so now if I want to reproduce what I just had on line 36 here, I can go, excuse my voice, E, or not E rather, but B, and then goes 71M out. This becomes a little more tricky. We have to isolate that B, 71M, and then our, oh no, I gotta do our foreground. I'll explain what these curly braces are doing in a second here. What number was that? That was 90. M. Our text. And I could have made this escape sequence one itself, but it's short enough that I don't mind just typing it. And I get what I got there. So the reason that I need these curly braces here is so if I just watch my syntax highlighting, if I just go B71, it thinks that's the name of the variable itself. But if I just go B in curly braces and then 71, see how my syntax highlighting changes? Let me just move my cursor out of the way. That's because these curly braces are denoting that this is the name of the variable, and it ends where that curly brace ends. So that's going to be kind of our core concepts here in terms of getting our colors working. The other thing we need is our little right and left arrows. And if we look again at our end goal, we can see that there's a hex code form. I'm just going to copy and paste this for ease of showing you. If I just paste that in, I can see that's the right facing arrow. And so I can even color it just like I would anything else. It's got that purple foreground and that green background. So you can see this arrow here between 41 and 2 is a is in one of those arrows with a light blue foreground and a green background. And then this one here is a green foreground and a purple background. And so this is all monospace. These are all their own characters, and you can kind of highlight them and get that illustrated a little more cleanly when you strip out the actual colors. And what you see is I'm just doing a good job of, okay, this one, the background on this C was purple, so the foreground on my arrow has to be purple. The background on the next one is blue, so the background on this one also has to be blue. And you start just kind of nesting that together. So with this elaborate syntax kind of out of our way, we can start looking at a couple other items here. So if we just go back and look at our end goal, we notice on line 1, I'm declaring a big long list of script blocks, and I'm just saving those in in a variable called prompt that I'm making available globally. Normally, you don't really want to play with global variables too much, but as we're working with my prompt here, I don't mind if those items are available outside of their normal scope. And this is using the array declaration, and I'm starting just to get right into it here. So if we look and just declare, I'm just going to copy that line so I don't have to type it. I can just paste that and hit enter. And let's put in a couple of items here. Let's just copy that. Not like that. Let's put a carriage return there. Sorry, a little technical glitch there, but I've got those two lines that I copied, and I kind of pasted them between the declaration for this list of script blocks, and I just named it P here because I didn't want to overwrite the value for my prompt. And if I go $P, I can see it just echoes out the value of those script blocks. And I need to redeclare my escape character, character 27, and my foreground character, because I'm using that as well, is my E. Come here. Followed by the open brace, and then a 38 and a 5, and all in quotes, and do another one for my background character. And now if I look at P, it's still just showing me the contents of my script block, but I can go p.invoke, and it shows me all of my stuff, or it would, if my background colors had been such that it was set up properly. So I'm getting this 28, and I'm getting this little arrow pointing to the side here, but it's not showing me my colors correctly. And the reason for that is confusing me. Oh, it's because I didn't include these semicolons when I did them for real. So now let's try again. p.invoke. It still does them kind of weird. I'm just going to clear. And what I can do here is I can use the join operator to make this a little less ugly. And it puts them all on the same line here where it's still kind of hard to read because it's all green. But here's my 0033, and then the blue arrow, and then the green part here. So I'm just getting exactly what's above me there, all on one line. And probably what I want at the end of one of these would be the command to do that reset, but because I'm not looking at the last thing in my script here, I don't need it. I put the reset at the very end of the very last one, just so that I don't have Ansi resets all over the place. So that's mostly what I've got going on with this script. So let's look at the array that I've got, or sorry, the list of script blocks that I've got. This first one is just a calculation of how wide the screen is. If I just look at this, shows me that my screen is, or my console rather, is 128 characters wide. And since this is monospace, I know that's the same. One character is one column, one of these columns is one character. So what I can do is write the entire width minus 29 white space, and then start writing my elements for the parts that go on the right here. So what this line actually is 29 white spaces, or sorry, 128 minus 29 white spaces. There we go. I can scroll there. Followed by what comes after it, followed by this green and white text. So I've got some logic in here for coloring that character that does the arrow. I'll show you that. There's the arrow that points that way, and I've just colored it green using the escape sequences. And then if it's the first command, there is no get history execution time, so I just write out a whole bunch of zeros. Otherwise it would get errors. If I'm trying to do a get history and there is no history, well, then it's not going to work very well. But I'm doing what I'm doing here. I'm getting the history of the last command that ran, and then I'm using new time span for the start execution time and end execution time to write that into that spot. Next one, I've got another one of these left-facing arrows that I'm coloring with the foreground is 7 and the background is the same as above, followed by the date and time in the same format that we had here. So we had foreground is 0, background is 7, and then the thing that we actually put in there. So if we just execute this, and I'm just going to append the items here we need not to screw up the rest of the console. You get the gray with the black text on it, because the foreground of 0 is black and the background of 7 is gray. So you can, you can kind of do this here to get a feel for it. If you go 0 to 255 and pipe that into for each, and I'm going to go background is going to be the integer that we're currently looking at, and I'm going to reset that as well. Don't need that there. 0m, and what I'm going to put in there is the actual integer. So what I'm doing here is for 0 to 255, because this is 256-bit color, I'm just going to change the background to whatever that integer represents, and then I'm going to write the actual integer that it was, and then I'm going to escape it so it doesn't screw up the rest of my stuff. So what I get is all the different colors, and they look a little different in the normal PowerShell console, but the normal PowerShell console doesn't get you the fancy Powerline fonts that I like. So you can kind of scroll through this and see, yeah, there's a 1 that I like, there's a 0 that I like. If you look really close, you can tell that's black, not just gray. Green for 2, 4, 5 is that purple that I think is fancy right there. And you can kind of scroll through and see this for yourself. In the actual PowerShell console, they're a lot more elaborate, and there's a lot more gradients. These are kind of doing some rounding, and they're not showing you truly what they are. But if you kind of go through this, you can do your color picking and get the colors that work best for you. I made the trade-off. I wanted that Powerline font more than I wanted additional colors. So then we end up on the left line. We just wrap around the line of the console. So the mechanism I'm abusing here is if I just keep typing, typing very quickly. Eventually I just wrap around onto the next line. And that's exactly what's happening in my prompt. Is I've written those width of the entire console minus 29 white spaces. Then I started writing that prompt, or those prompt elements for the execution duration and the time. And then I ran out of space. So it just wraps around to the next line and starts writing the rest of it. And there I'm writing in foreground of 15 and the background of 117. I'm writing the invocation history ID that we looked at, and then one of those characters. And then after that, I'm getting the number of items in that get location dash stack that we looked at, and writing another right-facing arrow character. Present working drive like we looked at, the leaf of the present working directory that we looked at, and I'm just separating all of these by these arrows. And what you can see is the foreground of 15 and the background of 117 are what I need for this for this invocation history. If we just look at this alone, which we kind of did already, but if we look at this just on its own and add in the handy don't make everything sad sequence, we get that 0039 in the light blue with the white. So the foreground of 15 makes the foreground color 15, which is that white, and the background of 117 gets us that blue background that we want. And then if we look at the character, it's got to have the same foreground color as our background. Why is that? Let's look at that next to it and kind of just take a close look at exactly what this character is. E0M. And so it's the blue of the background and the green of the next background. And so you might be going, what is going on? The foreground needs to match the background here because it's supposed to get us that overlaid effect, and the background needs to be the background of our next one. So you got to kind of think of this is a character on its own. If I could highlight it without highlighting everything else. Okay, that'll do. But see how that arrow character is literally between the two? This is a monospace font, so every character takes up one spot. So after this 0, the next character is this arrow. And that arrow is supposed to kind of generate this interleaving effect. It's a little easier to see where there's more contrast, like on this side, where the gray arrow has to have the same color as the background here, and the green has to have the same color as this green. So it takes a little bit of messing around with, and you'll find yourself kind of playing with these colors a lot, but you will get there, and it is pretty straightforward once you get it. Again, if you're not familiar with these escape sequences, this can be a bit to get your head around. But at its heart, all I'm doing is declaring a list of these script blocks. So these are all the different items and calculations that I want to make. And we saw how to get each of these earlier in the presentation. And then I'm going to execute them all. And just to make them a little fancier, I'm using these foreground and background altering escape sequences. And my prompt gets all of the values that happen when you invoke each of these different script blocks and joins them so that they all appear on one line. And that gets you my prompt. If you don't want to have to do all of this yourself and manually, Joel Bennett has a very handy PowerShell module called Powerline that's available. I think it's in the PowerShell gallery. It's also here on GitHub. And if you scroll through it, you can just, install module Powerline, import module Powerline. And then he's got a lot of great literature based on this same sort of technique, but he takes a lot of the trying to figure out how to make all those escape sequences yourself. It took me maybe an hour or two to really get my head around how all of these escape characters are working and how to use them all in concert and make them do pretty things together. But I found it was well worth it, and it meant I didn't have to pull a dependency on Joel's code. but that's a perfectly fine thing to do for you as well. I don't think he has any screenshots here, but you can see he's using the same type of logic I'm using. This is where I kind of reverse engineered his to get mine, to avoid pulling the dependency. He's just got a collection of script blocks, and then he does the join of the invoked version. So that goes by really quickly. 30 minutes is not an adequate introduction to how these escape sequences work, but I wanted to show you how I kind of take my prompt from basic to baller so that you can start looking at the same thing yourself. Start thinking about the different elements that would make sense for yours, and start thinking about how to get the colors going, whether you want to do it manually and do it kind of hard mode like we just did to look at all the escape sequences manually, or whether you want to use a helper module like Joel Bennett's Powerline. Either way, thanks so much for watching. Enjoy MVP Days. I've been Thomas Rayner, and see you next time.